Okay, so you've just graduated college, you got a computer science degree, and now there's undeniable proof that you know your time and space complexities, you know all the big O's, you know how to do dynamic
Where are we
programming,
going? Which
you know how
way?
computers work at a fundamental level. You probably took out some loans because colleges are expensive, and you know getting a computer science degree means you'll probably get a job after graduating. And so you get a software engineering job. You've done the interviews, you've convinced people that you're a competent person and they can trust you to work for their company. And now you're getting ready to start working at your first real job as a software engineer. You may have had internships, you may have done some projects, but now you're actually employed as a full time software engineer. You complete all of the company and HR trainings and you join your team. Now what? What do you do? How do you learn what it means to be an effective software engineer? And how do you start off your career? How do you provide your team value and prove that, okay, I do belong here on this team? I do deserve you paying me every 2 weeks. What do you do? So, I've been working as a software engineer in a corporate space for the last few years. And in those few years, I've been taking a part in the mentorship program at my company, which basically means whenever there's a new hire or sets of new hires, I serve as a mentor for them. Not necessarily telling them, like, how a team works and stuff because I'm outside of their team. I'm not their manager, I'm not their teammate. I'm just simply someone for them to talk to as they begin their corporate journey. And by doing this, I've had so many great conversations with so many new hires, and I feel like usually there's patterns and questions that get brought up that ultimately only the engineers themselves can answer. When they first join their team, I usually tell them, you should start off by understanding the team's projects. What do they do? Like, what is the purpose of your team? What are the products that your team owns? What do they work on? And why do they do it? And I feel like this is important because you can join a team, you can write code, and anybody could write code. Now even AI could write code. So, like, how do you contribute in an environment knowing that writing code really isn't enough, you know? You have to understand why the team exists in the first place. Obviously, it's to help make the company money by doing something and maintaining something, providing new features. But what is the benefit to the end user for the work that you do? And when you kind of get a grasp of that, you can kind of understand, okay, so this is my role. I need to deliver this value, you know, write code in such a way so that I could benefit the clients in X, Y, and Z ways. And then, okay, great. You know what your team does. You know what you should be doing. You know what you're working towards. But how does the team choose what they want to work on? What goals do they have for themselves? By understanding your team's short and long term plans, you'll also be able to understand how completing these smaller tasks fit into the bigger picture. I feel like you need to code with a purpose, or at least know why you're coding something. Otherwise, you're just not going to have the motivation to do it. As a junior engineer, you're probably going to start off by working on very small, low level code changes so that you can understand the processes. It's not that people think, okay, you don't know how to code, it's that they want you to understand what it takes to put code into production. So let's say you got your first task, right? You coded up a solution, and now what? You can't just merge it into the main line because somebody's probably going to have to take a look and make sure that what you're doing is correct and it works. You don't want to release any bugs for your first change. So, somebody has to review your code, right? How do you make it as easy as possible for your teammates to review your code? What could you do for them so that they know exactly what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to achieve it? Usually, this means, you just write self explanatory code, provide a great PR description, write great unit tests. But is there anything else? I feel like coding is like an art style. People always do it slightly different from others, and so you gotta understand the style of your team. Are you abiding by their coding standards? Does your code fit into their naming conventions? Do they write tests a certain way? Or Do they follow specific coding patterns and conventions? You have to understand that as the new engineer, your code and the way you code might not be exactly what your team is expecting. And that's totally fine because sometimes teams have been doing it a certain way for so long that they just haven't thought about doing it a better way. And that's where you can potentially come in. You have this fresh new perspective and you can ask questions and really get them thinking about why they do things a certain way. Because odds are, a lot of these engineers probably just do it a certain way because that's how it's always been done. But you could be the person to ask questions and break those patterns. Or at the end of the day, maybe you just get an explanation on why the way they do it is better and why you should follow this coding pattern, at least to keep the code base standardized. It would be really weird if a code base had all sorts of different styles of coding, right? You should just stick to one thing so that it's easily maintainable and easily understandable for any new person that comes in and looks at this code. The senior software engineers have been living with that code base for so long, so they probably know it like the back of their hands. But you, as the new engineer, you don't know that. You have to take a deep dive and just look at the code and live with it for a bit. It's going to take you a while to understand it. As you keep contributing changes, you'll start getting a feel for how things work in your application or whatever program you're writing. All right, cool. So you abided by their code standards, you wrote a great PR description, everybody loved your code, it looked fantastic. And now you get to merge your change to production. And you merge it. Well, now what, right? Do you just keep trying to contribute these small changes? Is that the goal of a junior software engineer? I feel like as a junior software engineer, your main goal should be to learn. You learn about your products, learn about your team, learn about your company, learn about how you like to work, and learn about how you can be somebody that's easy to work with. You might feel pressured to immediately start contributing high impact code, but if you rush this, you might neglect developing your other non coding skills as a software engineer, your people skills. How do you effectively communicate your ideas? How do you figure out the balance between adding features and resolving tech debt? How do you come up with ways to convince your team that a certain code change or something is important? A lot of these questions and a lot of these skills are developed with practice, and it's not something that you just learn by just coding, contributing, coding, contributing, coding. You have to break out of that cycle and really be a part of the team. You have to get into discussions involved with the code because as an engineer on a team, you are responsible for this code base. Like, this is yours. You own this code. Why wouldn't you want something you own to be as nice as possible, right? And so I feel like you should just be asking a lot of questions when you're brand new. It's how you'll learn from your teammates. It's how you'll potentially make mistakes and learn how to correct them. It's just a time where you're just supposed to learn, I guess. That's pretty much the ethos of it. And eventually, as you keep learning, as you keep contributing, you're going to get to a place where you feel so comfortable in your code that you're ready to take on bigger and bigger projects. A lot of the skills that you've learned for coding, like doing leak code grinding, creating personal projects, a lot of that probably involves small scale code. When you're working on a code base that like 4 or 5 people or even more people work on at the same time, there are a lot of things that are really weird about that you kind of got to get used to. And I feel like as a junior software engineer, that's what you're really learning. You're learning how to contribute in a corporate environment. There's going to be meetings that you have where you may have to discuss certain aspects of the code. You need to learn how to be a nice person, but also get your point across. And eventually develop that confidence where you feel good knowing, okay, I am writing good code. I am doing this the correct way. That's what being an engineer is all about. Solving problems and working with others and building something bigger than you could have built if it was just you on your own. And then also being able to effectively communicate your engineering ideas to people that aren't necessarily engineer minded. There's people all have their own roles in the company, right? And in the team too. There's product people who really know what a client wants, and then there's engineers that know how to build it. And so it's always going to be a conversation and a balancing act between the engineers and the non engineers so that you can both deliver something great. So I'd say if you're a junior software engineer, ask a lot of questions, be annoying. You need to understand why you do the things you do and why other people think the way they think. And that includes asking product people product questions as well. Because to be a good engineer, you need to be a good product person too. And I feel like having both of those skill sets really makes you an unstoppable person. You're going to know what the client wants, and you're going to be the one who knows how to build it. So that's it for today. Just kind of wanted to talk, give some advice, and just keep it a little casual, hence the snowboarding videos. But yeah, if there's anything else you want me to talk about in the software engineering world, feel free to leave a comment, drop a like, give me some support if you think that this was a good video and you learned something good and got some good advice. But yeah, see you next time.